Welcome to the Colorado State Employee Assistance Program podcast, focused on personal well-being. We ask leaders across Colorado state government how they manage their own emotional well-being and mental health. My name is Natalie Newman, and I'm an EAP specialist with the Colorado State Employee Assistance Program, or CSEAP. We offer mental health counseling, leader consultation, critical incidents response, mediation, and webinar and facilitation services. You can find more information at cseap.colorado.gov. Welcome to the podcast. Today we are speaking with Stan Hilkey. Stan has served as the Executive Director of the Colorado Department for Public Safety since June 2014. And we're really looking forward to having this conversation, as there tends to be stigma in law enforcement seeking mental health services. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Now, I'm curious, what do you do regularly to reduce your stress or support your own mental health and well-being?
Well, Natalie, thanks for that question, and I'm glad to be here today. I think before I say that, though, I just want to say that I think it's important to acknowledge that even leaders are just regular people too, that are going through the life just like everybody else, and we may never know what struggles are happening in someone's life, and they may often appear to be high-functioning people in organizations and yet have a lot going on. So the opportunity to speak as a leader is, I'm grateful for being able to do that. But, to get to the heart of your question, I would say that I probably don't adhere to some of the normal answers in this area where you talk about doing exercise, yoga, or meditation. I just try to make the best use of the time that I have. I enjoy doing things that make my mind take a vacation from work and the stresses of life. I have a BMW motorcycle. I ride it on the peak-to-peak highway whenever the weather permits. I like to walk my dogs. I listen to a good audio book. And most recently, I think the thing that has energized me the most is I get to spend time with a brand new granddaughter. So those are some of the things that I do. I also think that this is probably a hard thing to understand, but sometimes the most stressful work that I do actually fills my bucket. For example, when you're working through a crisis or a disaster, the opportunity to have your hand on the lever of something that is making a difference in people's lives who are having their very worst day is very, very powerful. And that, getting that intrinsic reward that speaks to your value system is actually very rewarding. Oftentimes we talk about how to deal with those things by escaping from those things. Sometimes immersing yourself in them when it really speaks to your value system is just as important.
Yeah. Well, and thank you so much for speaking to that, and also sharing that perspective of, like you may be a leader, but you're also a human.
Yeah. I really think that I'm blessed to be able to work with a whole group of people, and we have 6 divisions in the department. All of them have unique responsibilities, but we all work together to make Colorado a safer place. And when we're working on disasters, particularly and other crisis events, I often see people at their very best version of themselves.
Some people really work so well under that pressure and under that stress. What would you say is one of the biggest stressors of the many roles that you play?
It's interesting. While the disaster work is very rewarding, sometimes the work in public policy development is really challenging. Trying to take a public policy idea that might be generated at a legislative level and then figuring out how to shoehorn that into an operational role and actually make it executable can be very difficult. So you have to spend time working with the people that really are trying to achieve a goal in public policy and try to be influential on how you can take that and make that goal either meet what they want or even exceed what they want. Sometimes those things are really hard. It's not for the timid. But we do our very best, and I think we continue to build trust with our legislators and other public policymakers to try to make things work.
Yeah. I keep thinking of the phrase of doing the next best thing, right? In crisis, we might not always get to do the best thing because it might not be possible given resources or whatnot.
I spend a lot of time working on policy issues in the criminal justice system and criminal justice reform. And as you can imagine, it's one of the only systems that's actually formally set up to be adversarial, and by design. And so when you're working on public policy there, you're bringing in adversaries who have been adversaries for years and years and years, trying to get them to unpack all of the transgressions they've made upon each other, and actually get down to trying to find consensus is really difficult work. But again, if you can come out of that with something that everybody agrees to, it's pretty remarkable.
Absolutely. Well, what are some simple strategies that you'd be willing to share for managing the stress of your workday?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I do is I try to gain perspective. If I'm going through something tough, I often pause and say to myself, is this the toughest thing I've ever been through? And in 38 years in law enforcement and public safety, I can say confidently it usually never is the toughest thing I've been through. I've been through some things in my career involving shootings and those kinds of things. And when I look around and we're tackling a tough issue, whatever it is, it's not too hard for me to say, well, at least I'm not being shot at today, And gaining that perspective oftentimes resets me. I think in this cabinet role, as you talk to cabinet members, they will tell you their days are back-to-back meetings or traveling to meetings and another meeting, and you spend a lot of time, just rushing from one thing to another. I have become more disciplined, and my staff has helped me become more disciplined to create spaces in there so that you can stop, get out of your chair, move, go get a snack, fill your water bottle. I walk around the department, the campus, and try to say hi to people and interact. Just those little things sometimes give you that break. I have great staff, and I'm pretty decent at delegating. A lot of leaders I see sometimes don't delegate enough, and they try to take too much on, and then they become ineffective. And I have really good people to give a lot of work to, and they do a great job.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as a leader, what are some encouragements that you do or provide to your team to support their well-being?
Well, I think this is a little bit unique for us in public safety because, a few of our divisions are really sort of law enforcement oriented or even fire oriented. And in this part of the conversation, I think we have some very acute needs. We have people that will come back from a shift having experienced something very traumatic. And we've built systems within the department of peer support groups, people who are trained to debrief people after having been involved in a traumatic event or a serious event of any kind. And then that gives us an opportunity to assess, is this a person that might need some more help? And we've created a whole menu of services that can help. CSEAP is one of them, right? And we have police psychologists that we have online, all of this. And that's a little bit unique, I think, to us. But we do have a lot of those acute things. And the thing about it is that those acute things, if unattended, can become long-term chronic things. And so, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I think it's the same thing as if you can make your first impression by wrapping care around somebody as soon as you can after an event, you stand a much better chance of keeping that employee healthy, keeping them engaged, continuing to be productive, and not going down any path that where they get adversely affected by the stuff they see and experience. We also have employees, that may not be out on the front lines like a trooper or a fireman, but they're behind the scenes and they support those things as well. And that work is just as grueling sometimes. And we have wellness days that we allow people to take every quarter, and just take a day and do what you need to do. And I think the biggest thing that we probably try to do is create cultures within our division. I mean, like I said, we have 6 divisions, and every one of them has their own unique culture. But we want to try to create cultures, where people are watching out for each other. They're caring. They're empathetic. They're giving each other grace when they need to be given grace, because they might be having a bad day. And that looks different from culture to culture, right?
Absolutely. It reminds me a lot of some of the trainings that we've done that I believe that public safety has done in just talking about mental health and trauma as you would any other like health injury, right?
Yeah.
Like we can have mental health injury, and having that language and being able to speak about it, right? Like if you broke your bone,
Yeah.
you don't just like tough it out,
Right.
but that you go and you seek professional help.
I recently attended a court hearing, a sentencing hearing, where a man had pointed a gun in the face of a trooper on a traffic stop. And the trooper thought he was probably going to get shot in the face. And it struck me during the sentencing hearing that this individual that did this is going to go into the system, into the prison system, and be tracked in his progress and all of his programming and how he's doing and all of this from now on. And that will be a record all the time. And it struck me that this trooper, while appearing very healthy right now, are we going to track that, And are we going to continue to follow up on that? And will the judge or the court or even his doctor know that any of this stuff had happened, Because a lot of these things can manifest themselves years and years and years later. And sometimes that system feels a little backwards. And, I think if you talk to any victim of crime, they will tell you something similar, right? And a lot of times we spend a lot of focus on the care and rehabilitation of somebody, but we don't care long-term or track long-term the potential effects of these traumatic events. I mentioned that the agencies themselves have built these systems to deal with the acute things. I think as a state government, I see a little bit of gap every once in a while about how we could wrap immediate services around places and people in crisis. And we could do better there, I think. And I think the long-term care is there, but the immediate response within an hour kind of a thing might be better for us. And then that tracking, what happens when, somebody goes through a prison guard sees a suicide or something like that. Do we track that? Do we follow up with that person? Do we, or I've seen that happen a lot. And then we act surprised when that employee then develops performance problems or, something that gets in the way of their quality of work. Those are the kinds of things that I think if we could spend more time tracking, getting ahead of, perhaps we continue to make a better workforce for the state.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. And I think there's also that component of normalizing it too, right? Like, yes, something might have happened years ago. Maybe it was 5 or 10 or more than that. And, something has pushed that button and it's come up again. And knowing that it's okay and it's okay to seek help.
I've always been struck by talking with a therapist, for instance, about things that happened 20 years ago, and you never thought much about it until you start talking about it, and then suddenly you realize, gee whiz, perhaps I'm carrying a little baggage about that, right?
Yeah. Well, and I also hear those things that you value as well. So important. So, well, great. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Stan. Thanks for being on our podcast. On this podcast, we focus on mental health and well-being. If you are an employee of a state of Colorado agency or Colorado higher education public university or college, you are eligible for the Colorado State Employee Assistance Program services. You can visit CSEAP.colorado.gov for more information or schedule an appointment by calling 303-866-4314. Thanks for listening.